Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon from Free State, Colorado, and I hope you're doing well. The 2025 elections are over, and although we did not get all the results we wanted to, I am still hopeful and I'm still optimistic. Colorado will be a free state one day, and if you stick around to the end of the video, I want to show you some updated voter registration data that I just pulled from the Colorado Secretary of State's website this morning that kind of paints a little bit of a different picture for the future of Colorado. First off, also, I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you for all your support, all the donations, everything everybody did across the state of Colorado to support my campaign for city council. Of course, it did not go in the direction I wanted to. I had a lot of stacked against me. Maybe I'll get into that in a different video, but I got to say, going door to door, talking to neighbors, meeting people in the community, hearing their concerns, and really getting involved gave me such a different understanding and a really knowledge about my community and the people in it. And that was worth it for anything, for sure. It's a lot of education, a lot of interesting information I got. So I definitely encourage you to run for office because even if you don't win the race, you can still win something. And that's really being a more engaged member of your community, a more aware member of your community. And don't give up, folks. I'm not going anywhere. The future is bright for Greeley, bright for Weld County, bright for Colorado. And every time we lose, we learn something else that we're going to take into the future. So thank you. Also want to shout out CompleteColorado.com. And the reason is I get a lot of my news stories, a lot of the articles I talk about in these videos from Complete Colorado. It is a great website. I love that it's only focused on Colorado. CompleteColorado.com. They're not sponsoring this. Don't worry about that. But they have original reporting, which is great. I'm going to talk about some of their news stories. If you scroll down, they have headlines from around Colorado. And they'll post Free State Colorado stuff there too. So I love that. But it's really good to see some different information from stuff across our state. But let's talk about what happened on November 4th, 2025. Some of the really hard losses would be down in Aurora for sure. You know, we have Danny Jurinsky, who is an absolute rock star, leading the fight against the governor, against Congressman Jason Crow, against the Biden administration about defending her community against violent illegal aliens who are setting up shop there. So it's really disappointing to see her lose. It's crazy to see the progressive candidates gain some seats, flipping some seats, getting rid of the Republican majority on the Aurora City Council. I'd love to dig into that more in another video and see what potential is there for the future. But nonetheless, very, very interesting stuff and a little bit disappointing for sure. Another disappointment, of course, across Colorado was some of the school board candidates, right? Here's some Chalkbeat Colorado progressive school board candidates make inroads in races across Colorado. Now, I know a lot of you watching this are not happy with the election results. You know, I'm not either, obviously, but I'm not a doom and gloom person. I'm not a pessimist. I'm not moving out of the state of Colorado, and I really encourage you to stay and fight. We learn, we grow, we build. You know, we're building a network, we're building a movement here in Colorado to create a free state. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in one election cycle. So I just want to get that out of the way right at this first year at the beginning. But Douglas County, we saw some flips there. Woodland Park, which borders Douglas County and Mesa County, flip seats. Woodland Park, which borders Douglas County and Mesa County, which is based in Grand Junction, also flipped seats held by conservative-leaning board members. So there were some changes there. In some districts, such as Pueblo 70, Montezuma Cortez, board members elected Tuesday could nudge right-leaning boards toward the center. That's one perspective, right? But, you know, we've seen that across the state. We've seen some school boards. We know that the most motivated voters are going to show up, right? And especially in these odd year elections. Turnout, which we'll look at in a second, is extremely low. Very few people vote because there's not a lot at stake for them personally, right? You know, oh, I don't have kids in school or my kids are graduated. What difference does it make who's on the school board? I think that's how most people think. But on the progressive side, the Democratic side, they're teachers' unions. They're getting that money from the taxpayers, from the teacher salaries going to the unions for political campaigns. They are highly motivated, right? There's a huge motivation for them to get organized, to spend some serious money, and really mobilize people to show up for their candidates. So it ultimately becomes who is the most motivated voters? What difference does that make? You know, that's what makes all the difference, I would say. We saw it in northern Colorado as well, unfortunately. And Sherry Pike did a great job of calling out the Fort Collins chapter of the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, an overtly extreme left wing organization, 100%, endorsing some candidates that ended up winning. The socialism advocacy group officially endorsed just one candidate, Zoel Lane in Fort Collins City Council District 5, while recommending 2 dozen others in local races around northern Colorado. The DSA said they represent our chapter's best advice to voters. Wow. Although their lone endorsement lost her bid for city council, good, the group's recommendations were successful in 15 out of 22 other races. Wow. Including clean sweeps on both the Greeley-Evans School District 6 and Poudre Schools Board of Education, and 2 out of 3 on the Thompson School Board. Results of the St. Vrain Valley School Board election were not available. Larimer County still counting votes as of this video. It's crazy. But interesting there to see what happens there. What also is interesting too in Greeley, as Sherry mentions, only 1 out of the 4 recommendations won, and that was my race, right? So I'm in Ward 2. I was running against Democrat Deb DeBeauty, but like I said, this is a Democrat district. Greeley has 2 Democrat districts. The rest are all Republicans. All the Republican ones stayed Republican. The Democrats stayed Democrat. So it was really interesting to see, especially with the controversy over Cascadia and some of these other things happening in Greeley, that the voters were not interested in changing the makeup of the board. Status quo remained, ultimately. So interesting stuff there for sure. Of course, all the links at Free State Colorado. Now, here's interesting. From the Gazette editorial, November 6th, El Paso County's schools stay the course. So El Paso did not go the progressive route like so many others did. I think that's a good sign for El Paso County. I know a lot of us have been concerned that El Paso, Douglas, Weld, some of these more traditionally Republican or conservative counties were kind of moving in the opposite direction. Doesn't seem to be the case, at least with this election. So that's good news there. I did a video, an interview with Dr. Eddie Waldrop. I really enjoyed talking to him earlier this year. You can find that on Free State Colorado, of course, but I'm really happy to see that he won for sure. So just a few lines here from the article. A blue wave that saw conservatives nationwide lose governor's races, ballot initiatives, and even school board elections appeared to have affected Colorado as well. It was a setback in our state for candidates running on student academic growth against the union machine. Well, that's putting it lightly. But there was a bright spot. El Paso County, where reform-minded candidates swept Academy District 20's 3 seats, won 2 of 3 contested seats in the ultra-competitive Colorado Springs School District 11, and won at least 1 of 2 seats up for grabs in School District 49. The second race in 49 remains too close to call. So that's interesting stuff here. We're definitely seeing some changes down in Colorado Springs as well. So good to see that for sure. I had to bring that up here. Now, Colorado Politics did have an interesting article here. 4 takeaways from Colorado's election results. Let's just take a quick look at that. Voters last night embraced a major spending request proposed by state and local officials, as well as picked their next set of municipal and school board leaders. All told, Democrats won big. Here are some of the key takeaways. Democrats are energized. And I know that's something that a lot of us are not happy about for sure, but it's the reality of it. We have to ask ourselves why, right? We have to learn, we have to understand, and we have to figure out what to do differently next time. Candidates and issues supported by Democrats won on Tuesday, when voters embraced statewide and local ballot questions endorsed by the party, even as they rejected Republican candidates in key municipal and school district elections. Colorado's blue wave had reached echoes across the country. In Colorado, Democrats and candidates and issues supported by the party practically swept the table, ousting incumbents to take the majority on the Aurora City Council, including Danielle Jurinsky and the Douglas County School Board, and winning mayoral races in Centennial and Westminster. In suburban Jefferson County, candidates backed by the teachers' unions won all the races. So, of course, we're a year after Donald Trump won the national election, so a lot of these Democrats are really motivated. Like I said earlier, who's the more motivated base, right? Who's the more motivated number of voters to show up? Now, this, of course, is extremely concerning. A glimpse into the public's appetite for a tax hike. Colorado voters showed an appetite for a tax hike, which could play into a potential major fight next year over keeping or restructuring income tax rates. A coalition is pushing to eliminate Colorado's flat tax rate in order of a graduated one, and at the same time raise billions of dollars by raising taxes on new brackets while cutting them for individuals at the lower end of the proposed spectrum. Last night, voters approved a pair of referenda to raise taxes on residents earning more than $300,000 to bolster funding for free school lunches and augment the state's SNAP program. The difference, of course, is that last night's ballot measures are geared toward a specific spending for a specific program. Free meals for all K through 12 students, while adopting a graduated income tax is a much bigger question. So there you go. That's very interesting stuff to see. And, I mean, let's be real, folks. Most people out there, even conservatives, voted to take money away from people making over $300,000. I do believe that's the case. There's a lot of people who truly believe in liberty and freedom. Don't get me wrong, who voted against it, but it's an easy thing to vote for, especially in these tough economic times. And I think that's just the reality of where we're at. That's a really, really tough pill to swallow. That's for sure. We talked about the school boards in Douglas. Now, this is really interesting, and I was pretty happy to see this. Littleton balks at density. Let's just make this a little bit bigger for you. There we go. Littleton voters favored a ballot measure that disallows multiplexes and similar types of housing in single family home neighborhoods. At issue is whether to alter the city's charter to disallow development of multiplex homes like duplexes, triplexes, and quadruplexes in neighborhoods zoned for single family homes, part of a larger push for density in Metro Denver. Back in January, Littleton council members considered an ordinance allowing duplexes, multiplexes, triplexes, and ADUs within single family zone neighborhoods. Homeowners, in response, pushed back on the city, resulting in the council indefinitely postponing the ordinance. I mean, that's great, folks. The fact that citizens, homeowners, people who are invested in the community are standing up to the city government and saying, hey, not so fast, folks. Fueling that policy change is the idea of density, embraced by many state and local officials as a cure to housing, homelessness, and transportation woes. It is an idea that has permeated policymaking at the state capitol. It's what Jared Polis loves, where lawmakers are pushing for, among other things, housing clusters coastal transit. Now, I've been talking about this for years, did a lot of great videos with Natalie Menton on it, and it's definitely not an issue that's not going away. But yeah, they want high density housing surrounding mass transit corridors, so everybody's taking the bus, everybody's taking the train, and they crammed into these apartments, no parking, no room for people to have chickens, to have a yard, to have a nice quiet neighborhood. It's not what people want, right? This is about neighborhoods and homes and what you want your neighborhoods to be like in the future. Mark Harris, a spokesperson for Rooted in Littleton, said after the ballot measure took an early and commanding lead, maintaining that 3A is not a partisan issue. Rooted in Littleton had to put 3A on the ballot. So very interesting stuff there. Definitely interesting to see. So it's a mixed bag, ultimately, is what I'd say. Now, if you want to really dig into the entire statewide results, you can go to the Colorado Secretary of State's website there, look at the election results. But I just want to point out a few key things here. So, big thing as of right now, if you can see that, I know it's a little bit smaller. Voter turnout 39.88%. 39.88%. So 40% of Colorado's active voters only showed up at the polls. I mean, when you think of it that way, things could change dramatically if there's just bigger turnout efforts, if people are motivated and excited to vote. Active voters, 4.1 million. Ballots cast, 1.6 million. Wow. Now looking at Proposition LL, it passed with an extremely wide margin, right? Without raising taxes, may the state keep and spend all revenue generated by the 2022 voter approved state deduction, blah, blah, blah. That's the school lunches. And yeah, 65%, 65%. 1,064,000 people voted for it. Only 500,000 voted against. 65 to 34. Wow. Now, what's interesting, I like this feature on the Colorado Secretary of State's website. You can actually look at the map here. Now, green is all the counties who voted for it, and red is all the counties who voted against it. So, like I said, I mean, you even see Weld County. Now, it was a 10,000 vote difference there, voted for it. Let's look at El Paso here. There we go. El Paso, I mean, 105,000 to 76,000. So they definitely voted for it. Looking at Douglas County, 70,000 to 57,000. So even quote unquote the more conservative counties, the counties that maybe Trump won in 2024, definitely voted for it. And part of the reason is I think, people want a free lunch, right? They're okay with the idea of other people paying for their food, for their kids. It's going to save them money, and it's easy to steal from somebody who's got more than you, right? Especially if you say, "Hey, they got way more money than me. They can pay for my kids' lunch." It's not right, but that's unfortunately how a lot of voters think. So interesting breakdown there. Very, very interesting breakdown. You can look at this further if you'd like. Let's look at Proposition MM. So Proposition MM didn't pass quite as close. It was just a full-on tax increase as well. mean, they were a little bit more honest here. Shell state taxes be increased by $95 million. Of course, it is only focusing on, only affecting people making over $300,000 a year. Still passed at 59% to 40%. So still a big difference there. The map's not quite exactly the same. You could see how some of the counties here, like Douglas County, voted against it. It was a little bit tighter, only about a 4,000 swing, 4,500 swing in El Paso County. Wald County only passed it by 500 votes. So you can see kind of the popularity of this, how people are willing to still raise taxes on people who make a lot of money. Douglas County voted against it by about 5,000 votes. So MM was a little bit more closer, but still, nonetheless, folks, people want other people to pay for their food. I mean, that's the reality of it. I mean, if you had a ballot measure that said, we're going to tax everybody who makes $1 million more and pays for everybody else, people would probably do it. I mean, that's just the reality of the world we live in, unfortunately. But you can dig in and take a look at these results here. So you can see Daniel Jarinsky got 21.94% of the vote. You get 2 votes here on this one. Rob Andrews and Allie Jackson beat her out. So, I mean, quite substantial margins actually, and you can really dive in and check out the rest of them too, which is it's pretty interesting stuff. But I do want to point out here El Paso County being a little bit different, right? So I thought it was interesting to see El Paso County went a little bit different direction for the school board members. Their turnout was actually lower than the state, which is interesting. So it makes me think that it's only 35% voter turnout there. If you could see that on the screen, that, who was more motivated to vote, right? Were these parents just more activated? Did the Republican Party do more? I don't know the answer to that, but it is interesting to see for sure. Denver, gosh, Denver, what a disaster down there. Like I said, all the links at Free State, Colorado. I'm not going to go into this, but Proposition LL, 81% of the vote in Denver. MM, 74% of the vote in Denver. I mean, people definitely support that there. 163,000 votes. 132,000 of them voted yes on LL. So, I mean, the legislature knows what they're doing. They know if they're going to ask for a tax increase, they're really going to try and make it only apply to the wealthy, right? Here's the Denver mayor, Mike Johnston's ballot issues, his bond issues, excuse me, who he's taking out $1 billion worth of debt. It's going to end up costing taxpayers, another 500,000 to 500 million to another billion. It's going to cost them a lot of money to take out this debt for all these little projects around the city. But voters approved it. Voters like the idea of saying, hey, we don't care if the government goes into debt. We don't care if the taxpayers are on the hook for paying down this debt in the future. It doesn't mean a tax increase at all. It just means the tax money we're going to is going to go towards the banks, towards paying this interest in the long term. So horrible investment for the community, of course, but nonetheless, that's how people go. That's how people vote. So 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, substantial margins there, folks. 2E. A couple of interesting questions there, but I want to talk about 310. This is one of the ones that most disappointed me. This is the flavored tobacco ban. So voters voted 70% to keep the flavored tobacco ban, which is crazy to me. Only 29% voted to repeal the flavored tobacco ban. I mean, that's crazy. It's such a shame that, 500 little businesses are going to be affected. We're going to see mom and pop tobacco stores have to leave the city. And it's interesting stuff there. Bad news. But like I promised you here, I want to show you something that maybe leaves a little bit better taste in your mouth. Let's take a look at voter registration data. So I pulled this from the Secretary of State's website. This was updated as of November 1st. So this is October latest numbers, right? This is the latest numbers you can get. And I really wanted to see what's the breakdown difference, right? Because Colorado's this blue state, the Democrats are in control of everything. But what does the breakdown actually look like in terms of raw numbers? What does it look like by age? So I thought this was really interesting. So you can download these spreadsheets yourself at the Secretary of State's website, but I'm really just focused on the Democratic, the Republican, and the unaffiliated voting statistics here of voter registration data. You can look at gender, you can look at a lot of things, but let's look at age here. So, right, let's just look at the totals to start. So, active total voters. Colorado has 1,032,000 registered Democrats who are active voters. The Republicans have only 96,343 active voters there. So that's the Democrats have 25% active voters of these three groups here. Republicans only have 23%. So when you think about it, the Republicans or the Democrats have a 2.39% more voters, not a ton, right? Really, as most of us know, the biggest thing here is unaffiliated voters. So 51% of Colorado's voters are unaffiliated. right? They don't want to be affiliated with either party, the Democrats or the Republicans, which I think is interesting. And what does that say for the future, right? But this is down by age. So this is Democrat versus Republican. So this top number here is the grand total for Democrat. I want to start with them because they are really the dominant party, right? So this is voter registration data as of October 2025, broken down by age. So under 18, that's pre-registered individuals, 18 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, 65 to 74, and 75 plus. So right now, believe it or not, there are more registered, pre-registered voters under the age of 18 that are registered Republican than they are Democrat. There's 3,171 more young people registered with the Republican Party than with the Democratic Party in Colorado currently. That's pretty wild, right? I don't know if you expected that. I don't know if you knew it. But basically, you got of people under 18 who are pre-registered to vote, 8%, 8.35% are registered Republican, 5% are registered Democrat, and 86% of them are registered unaffiliated, right? So that's interesting as well. But nonetheless, the fact that under 18 is going more towards the Democrat than the Republican, or more towards the Republican than the Democrat, I think is super fascinating. Now, looking at 18 to 24 here, Democrats have 64,000 registered voters. They only have about 6,000 more, 6,800 more than the Republicans, which is kind of interesting. That's not a huge jump. The percent of Democratic voters that are 18 to 24 is 14%. It's only almost 13% for the Republicans, so pretty dang close. The Democrats only have a 1.5% advantage among young people 18 to 24. That is very, very interesting. And I won't go into every single age bracket, but nonetheless, you can kind of see the breakdown here. So the fact that we have some changes, let's just look at the difference, right? So we have 3% more Republicans than Democrats, 18 to 24, 1.5% more Democrats, 25 to 34, 9.3% more Democrats, 7.7% for that 35 to 44. And then when you get into the older brackets, most people would probably expect this 55 plus, most people are registered Republican, right? I mean, 55 to 65 folks, you got 30,000 more registered Republicans than you do than you do Democrats. 31% of all voters that are 55 to 64 are registered, are 31% of them are Republicans, only 25% of them are Democrats. So I think this is really interesting. You can see kind of the breakdown here. Let me try and zoom out a little bit so you can kind of see the difference here. So you really see the Democrats have this monopoly on voters, or this huge advantage. Let me put it a different way. This huge advantage on voters really in these two age brackets. That's really the biggest thing, is the 25 to 44. 25 to 44 is the Democratic base here in Colorado. 55 plus is the Republican base here in Colorado. Under 18, definitely making some inroads. And then but really under 18 to 24, it's not that many more Democrats than Republicans. So you can see that change. You can kind of see this breakdown here where, there's a huge surge of 25 to 34-year-olds, and you got to think about what was going on back then. That was probably, more like the first Trump term, think 10 years ago, something along those lines, when those kids were turning 18, or, in college around that time, right? And then you can see, they're just kind of, people are souring with the Democratic Party and kind of going the opposite direction. So very interesting to see, I think. But also check out this bottom line here. Check out this bottom line. So 75 plus here in Colorado, 33% of them are unaffiliated. Then it goes to 39%. Then it goes to 43%. The younger people get in Colorado, the more likely they are to be unaffiliated, right? I mean, you can see this where you have 18 to 24-year-olds, 72% of them are unaffiliated. Only 59% are 59% for that 25 to 34, 55%. So it's totally linear, and younger people are not registering with the parties. I think that's extremely interesting. I think that's extremely important, because, I mean, if you've ever shown up to a Republican meeting, for example, it's a lot of older people, right? Not too surprising. If you're showing up to Democratic political events, it's a lot of older people, not too surprising. Most young people are not going to participate in the parties. They're not, which means they're not showing up to caucuses. They're not showing up to assemblies. They're not going to necessarily vote in the primaries as much on the partisan level, right? They're going to be that unaffiliated vote who can kind of pick and choose who they want to support. So I think that is very interesting. I think that shows a lot too. There's so many efforts in the Republican Party right now to try and create a closed primary system or restrict the ballot who elects for the primaries to just be party members. But you got to look, folks. I mean, the party just like the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, it's shrinking. Now, under 18, we're seeing a little bit of an uptick there, but nonetheless, compared to the next age brackets, it is definitely decreasing. Both parties are decreasing tremendously. So you know and I think this a lot with my efforts at Free State Colorado, that it's really outside of political parties is where we're going to have the biggest impact. It's really outside of political parties where we can make some big differences and big changes. Political parties are great because they provide you the ballot access. You can get on the ballot, but most people don't really want to be registered one or the other the younger they are. So I think that is one of the most fascinating things we need to realize, but also hopefully feel a little more hopeful knowing that really these lower two age brackets, the Democrats are losing people like crazy. Now the Republicans are as well, but at the same time, Republicans are starting to pick people up who are on the younger side, which I think is extremely fascinating. You talk about Charlie Kirk, you talk about Donald Trump. You can talk a lot about different things there. Let's look at El Paso real quick because El Paso is definitely more of a red county. I did the same numbers here so you can see the voter difference. Um, 10% of people under 18 are GOP. Compare that to the state where it's only 8%. 14% are the 18 to 24. So you can just see, generally speaking, that El Paso County has a lot more Republican voters in all age brackets. But nonetheless, it's still shrinking. It's shrinking for both parties. So I think that's also important to notice there as well. But definitely a red county there. One thing that's interesting too, and you got to think about how social media is affecting young people. I mean, they're growing up in this world with social media. Thankfully, I did grow up with social media, and a lot of people out there. But nonetheless, look, this is the kind of stuff that Homeland Security is posting. Join.ice.gov, send them back. You got the Mel Gibson with the Patriot and the fuzzy Zoom kind of look to it. You have a Duty American, 5 million views. You got the Lord of the Rings reference here. The board is set. The pieces are moving. We come to it at last. The great battle of our time. There won't be a Shire Pippin. Join.ice.gov. Nearly 6 million views. I thought that was hilarious. But you got to think like the marketing, right? The marketing aspect. Here's from the very popular video game Halo, popular when I was a teenager. Finishing the fight, destroy the Flood. The Flood is this like invasive enemy in the Halo game. Nearly 29 million views on X, join.ice.gov. So I just think it's so interesting when you talk about how young people, internet culture, the rise of these right wing influencers like the Charlie Kirks and the others out there, where is that going and what effect is that going to have on the future? I think is so important. But really, folks, if you want to see Republicans make some inroads into Colorado politics, you should really be mobilizing 55 and plus. That's your best age bracket there. And then under 18s, as they're coming along, you can see that slight difference under 25. There's a huge opportunity there. So if the Republicans or conservatives or pro-liberty individuals out there, whatever you want to call them, are able to mobilize more of the young people, I think there's a huge opportunity. The Democrats aren't cool anymore, right? It's not cool. It was cool to be a Democrat when George Bush was in office. Even when Obama was in office, right? He kind of carried some of that because, he was the cool guy. But nowadays, Trump's the cool guy, right? I mean, the Charlie Kirks and these people, that's what's cool. Guns are cool. A lot of this stuff, freedom is cool. You see all these podcasters and people like Joe Rogan and Dave Smith and some others out there that are really popularizing some different ideas to young people. And that is kind of becoming the counterculture. And you can see it in voter registration statistics here in Colorado. So interesting stuff. Gosh, there's so much more to talk about, but I really appreciate your time today. I'll be talking a lot about strategy going into 2026, but I really appreciate you. And thank you guys so much. We'll talk soon.